Well, we are still in our series looking at the book of James and its challenge to have a serious faith that affects our daily choices. Last week, Pastor Carol encouraged all of us, not just 20% of us, but all of us, to do what we can to build the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. This week, we are going to hear another challenging one. That's James's specialty. In our text today, we get to hear what James has to say about the words we choose and the words we let loose. James chapter 3, beginning with verse 1. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers and sisters, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For all of us make many mistakes. Anyone who makes no mistakes in speaking is perfect, able to keep the whole body in check with a bridle. If we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we guide their whole bodies. Or look at ships, though they are so large that it takes strong winds to drive them, yet they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great exploits. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire. And the tongue is a fire. The tongue is placed among our members as a world of iniquity. It stains the whole body, sets on fire the cycle of nature, and is itself set on fire by hell. For every species of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by the human species, but no one can tame the tongue, a restless evil full of deadly poison. With it we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse those who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and brackish water? Can a fig tree, my brothers and sisters, yield olives, or a grapevine figs? No more can salt water yield fresh. This is the word of the Lord, so thanks be to God. Well, I have to confess, this is a rather inconvenient sermon today. Very inconvenient sermon, especially for me. This last week, I was angrier than probably at any point in my entire life. And if you ever see my brother, you can ask him. He could tell you I was no stranger to being angry at him while we were growing up. But this last week, angrier than probably any other time in my entire life. The National Presbyterian Church switched our prescription insurance, and the new group kept messing up our son's most important anti-seizure medication. It's a really weird one, and so I started the process 3 weeks early, figuring that would be enough time for them to figure it out. The first week went by with no progress, but that wasn't all that surprising. When the second week also disappeared, even with multiple check-ins from me and from my doctor, my worry started increasing, my agitation started increasing, and as that week disappeared, they both increased exponentially. As we got down to the last few packets of medication and still could not get it right, as I realized my son might not have his most important medication, as the ridiculousness and the needless roadblocks seemed insurmountable, I lost my cool. In fact, I wasn't just angry. I would say I was enraged. Now, James says in our text today how great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire. Well, I wasn't really kindling a small fire with my words to the insurance company. I would say I was more like in the, I love the smell of napalm in the morning kind of approach. As Bruno Mars said in the song Uptown Funk, I was so hot I'd make a dragon want to retire, man. Now, he was talking about something else, but I'm going to apply it to my angry words. Faced with my child not having his medication, my words were more scorched earth than spring of fresh blessing, as is intimated by James in our text today. And I'll go one step further and confess I am still not ready to ask Jesus to forgive me on that, still feeling justified in my, dragon fire-breathing words. I'll have to ask him for forgiveness eventually, but not there yet. And so I tell you this so that you know that this is an inconvenient sermon for me. I feel like I would be a hypocrite if I did not fess up to the least pleasant words I have used in at least a couple of decades, spoken the same evening that I sat down to write this sermon. So there you go. This sermon is coming to you from a place of spiritual need, not from a place of spiritual victory. So, as one fire-breathing dragon to another, let's talk about our flaming tongues, shall we? I mean, what role have words played in your life? What are some memorable words you have heard? Maybe you remember some famous words, like Al Michaels' famous, "Do you believe in miracles?" in 1980 Olympics. Maybe you remember some famous speeches. Maybe it's something more personal. Has someone given you a meaningful compliment that has stuck with you for a long time? Or has someone said something painful that sticks with you to this day? Words can have that effect. In the comic Calvin and Hobbes, Calvin says to his tiger friend Hobbes, "I feel bad that I called Susie names and hurt her feelings. I'm sorry I did it." After a pause, Hobbes suggests, "Maybe you could apologize to her." Calvin ponders this for a while and replies, "I'm still hoping there's a less obvious solution." Can you identify with Calvin? Words can have a big impact. They can cause pain, as Calvin feels he did to Susie. Words can bring healing, as Hobbes suggests apologizing. Words can have a big impact. In fact, there's a book called "The Power of Words and the Wonder of God." That's a title for you. One of the contributors to that book makes an interesting point. The author says, "The book of Proverbs is, in ways, a treatise on talk. I would summarize it this way: words give life, words bring death, you choose." And what does this mean? It means you've never spoken a neutral word in your life. The author continues, your words have direction to them. If your words are moving in the life direction, they will be words of encouragement, hope, love, peace, unity, instruction, wisdom, and correction. But if your words are moving in a death direction, they will be words of anger, malice, slander, jealousy, gossip, division, contempt, racism, violence, judgment, and condemnation. Your words have direction to them. That's an interesting and challenging quote. It's worth thinking about, especially the part that says you have never spoken a neutral word in your life. Every word we speak has direction to it. They say a business is always either growing or shrinking. You can't just stay exactly the same. Or think about this church. I couldn't say, we need to have exactly the same members every year, exactly the same number. We couldn't do that, right? We'd either be growing or shrinking. In the same way, our words are never neutral. They can't be static. They are always either bringing people toward life or bringing people toward death. Now, there are degrees of that, of course. Have your words been cultivating life? Have your words been cultivating death? As you think about this, I encourage you not to get caught up in the big picture or your overall average, because we're not super reliable on that. So I encourage you actually to think about individual people. So here's another way to think about this. Make a list, either in your head or if you're really feeling convicted on this, write it down. Make a list of people with whom your words have cultivated life. Write down the names of people where your words have cultivated life. And make another list of people where your words have cultivated death. Again, there's different degrees. But are you directing people toward life or directing people toward death? Make a list of individual relationships in your life. And if you need that reminder again of ways to think about which direction you're going, here's that list from that challenging quote I read earlier. If your words are moving in the life direction, they will be words of encouragement, hope, love, peace, unity, instruction, wisdom, and correction. But if your words are moving in a death direction, they will be words of anger, malice, slander, jealousy, gossip, division, contempt, racism, violence, judgment, and condemnation. Those are some ways to cue yourself on which relationships are moving toward life, which toward death based on your words. Now, as I looked at that list, I didn't see insurance companies anywhere on that list. So I'm good, right? And like I said before, I mean, this list says like anger, but like I said, I wasn't angry. I was enraged. That's not on the list, so I'm good, right? And I mean, my words were directed at a company, not a person, so I'm good, right? Of course not. But that's the justification process that we're all probably going through in our minds right now. Oh yeah, Pastor Cody, I agree that words of anger and malice and slander and jealousy, gossip, division, contempt, racism, violence, judgment, and condemnation, yeah, those are all bad. But my case is different, you see. I can't read your mind, but I know a bunch of people hearing me are thinking that right now, and that's because we're human, and justifying ourselves is something that we are like innately and insanely talented at. I get it. I do that too. But would our excuses and our special cases hold up to the gaze of Jesus? I mean, really, would they? Usually not. And so I'm going to own up to the fact that my words were in the death category, somewhere in the death category this last week in that situation. My words were fine for week 1 and probably week 2, but not week 3. I challenge you to face the reality of your own words as well, without excuses. The nice thing is we don't even need excuses, right? Because Jesus is ready to forgive us and ready to help us cultivate a new and right spirit within us. We don't have to have excuses. We just need faith in Jesus, and He will take care of the forgiving. He will invest in that new and right spirit if we don't hide from Him. You know, our inner spirit, that new and right spirit, our inner spirit is definitely on the line when it comes to our words, because our words not only create life or death in those who hear us, our words also shape our inner spirit as well. James tells us an analogy in our text today. Look at ships. Even though they are so large that it takes strong winds to drive them, yet they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great exploits. Our words steer our own ship. Our words steer our own hearts. Our words create a fount of living water within ourselves, or they create a cesspool of decay within ourselves. Our words do that. Because you see, the more we choose to speak angry words, the more angry our hearts become. The more we say, well, I shouldn't tell you this, but then the more gossipy our hearts become. The more we speak judgmentally about other people, the more judgmental our hearts become. And on the flip side, the more we choose to speak words of peace, the more peaceful our hearts become. The more we speak encouragement to others, the more encouraging our hearts become. The more hope we speak to others, the more hopeful our hearts become. And the more lovingly we speak to others, the more loving our hearts become. And I'm actually going to take this principle one step further even. Because I think our internal monologue is also comprised of words. And so the more we stew internally, even if we never say it, the more we stew internally about how someone annoys us, the more annoyed our hearts become. The more we think about all the things we should have said to really show someone, the more vindictive our hearts become. Our internal monologues matter too, because those are words too. So your words, even your internal words, shape your heart. If you want to become less annoyed by someone, choose different words to say or different words to think. Maybe try to figure out even a small list of ways they're a blessing or ways you're grateful it's not worse. Come up with different words. or put your mind on something else. If you're feeling hopeless, remind yourself or remind someone else of the hope that remains. It may not be hope that your situation will change. It might be hope that you are still a child of God, that you are still standing despite your situation. It's a different kind of hope, but it makes you a more hopeful person. This is actually why singing is such an important part of our faith tradition. When we sing words of hope, we also become more hopeful. When we sing words of peace, we become more peaceful. When we sing words of faith, we become more faithful. If you want to try to change something in your heart, change what you're listening to, change what you're singing. That will help. When I sat down to write this sermon after being so worked up by that insurance company, I chose to listen to very specific music while I wrote. I listened to Christian songs that were peaceful, slower, more mellow. I didn't need anything to pump myself up. I was already pumped up. I needed to calm down. And those songs I chose intentionally helped my soul calm down so I could hear the still small voice of the Lord. What we say out loud, what we say internally, and what we sing, all of those shape our hearts. So how have your spoken words been shaping your heart? How have your internal words been shaping your heart? How has your music been shaping your heart? Sisters and brothers, words have a huge impact. And our words, every single word, has a direction. We do not have neutral, static words. They either cultivate life or cultivate death. Again, there are certainly big degrees on that. But all of our words point in one direction or the other. So I encourage and I challenge you to think through your individual relationships, not just the big picture average, your individual situations, your individual relationships, and think about, are you cultivating life or cultivating death with your words in that specific relationship? Because it doesn't take a whole lot of poison to make a cup of water dangerous, right? On average, in fact, the majority of what's in that cup is water. It's good. But just a little bit is enough to poison it. You might only have one or two relationships where your words are bringing death, but that is still poisoning your own soul. I mean, would you like it if I said, I'm going to give you this glass of water, I'm just going to pour a little bit of arsenic in there? No, it's still poison. Let's skip the poison, right? I'll take the arsenic-free water, please. Our spoken words point to Jesus or they point away from Jesus. And it doesn't take a whole lot of pointing away from Jesus before it points our own hearts away from him as well. Our internal words also can point to Jesus or point away from Jesus. And our music and our songs can point to Jesus or away from Jesus. Our words, spoken or internal, cultivate life or death. Choose life. I need to as well. Amen.